Historical film documentarian, poet, and author Sufia Giza is joining us on today's Big Blend Radio Third Friday Family History Show to discuss her book that traces her ancestry. It's called Moundbuilders of Ancient America, A Legacy Reclaimed, and it's not only the story of her Black Amer-Indian ancestors. Did I say that? Amer-Indian. There's a whole bunch of ways to say this. It traces her heritage of Mississippian Moundbuilders who had their own chiefdoms and queendoms, right? Like ancient America here, but also goes into something completely new that is going to revolutionize what you think of who was here first. And you know, this is something every country delves into. Who was here first, and then people had battles over it. And now, now all of us here now today get to dig back in the past. And apparently, she did it for over 30 years, and really has come across some extraordinary history. I encourage you to go to her website, moundbuilderswindclan.com. Of course, the book is on Amazon. Again, her name is Sufia Giza. Sufia, welcome. How are you?
Hi. Thanks, and thanks for having me on. Good day.
Yeah, thank you so much. Nancy and I are very excited to have you. Also, we have Holly Hansen, who is the founder of FamilyHistoryExpos.com with us, and she's on all of our Third Friday Family History shows, and I know very excited as well. Holly, I know you read part of this, what Sufia's delved into. Have you ever touched on mound builders in your research and what you do, Holly?
You know, I haven't. I did an article once on the mounds down in South America, the Mayan language, and breaking the script, you know, because in genealogy you have to learn foreign languages, you have to learn symbols. There's just so many things to learn, and if we can break the Mayan script, which is a dead language, no one spoke it, we can do genealogy. And so I did an article on that once, but that's another reason I'm very fascinated with this work, because it's to your core, it doesn't matter how many generations back in time, it is powerful, and it propels us forward to do amazing things that we would never do if we weren't aware of that heritage that we have.
Sufia, really cool. I wanted to ask, have you always been tracing your family history, and is it really 30 years of research here?
Well, I've always been fascinated with my family history. It has started as a child. I was born and raised in Southern California, and my mom's from South Carolina, and when I was about 8, my grandmother came to live with us for a year, and she didn't speak English. She spoke Gullah. She spoke Gullah, which is a language in the Sea Islands here from North Carolina down through Florida, and it has a lot of African influence. And so I became fascinated, and I picked up the language as a child. And growing up in Southern California, I was exposed to the Latino culture, and my best friend next door was Chicana, and so her mom started giving me a word a day when I was about 9 years old, and so I began to learn Spanish then, and then I went to college and majored in it. And when I was 17, in my first Spanish class, I was introduced to the Nahuatl language, which a lot of people associate with the Aztec, but in digging a little bit deeper, the syntax is from an Olmec tongue. So I was 20 years old when I saw my first Olmec head, and that's where this journey began. So it actually is 38 years now that I've been compiling information.
Wow. It to me, this is interesting also going into the Gullah culture. Nancy and I, as we travel on our Love Your Parks tour across the country, especially going to national park sites, national park units, we do all parks. But, you know, that area, I love it because it's so protected, and hope it stays that way and keeps that, you know, culture and tradition alive. I'm dying to go out there, you know, because it just, I've seen so many documentaries, and I feel very connected to that. I think it's because I was raised in Kenya and South Africa that I'm very, you know, I don't know. It makes me feel at home. Whatever I've seen of it, I just want to go home. You know, so it's interesting. But I'm a blonde-haired, blue-eyed chick, so there you go. You know, so I'm just going to say that there's a connection there for me that brings it to be very real. And I think that it's interesting when you also bring up Native American heritage, and then we're looking African American heritage. And I think whenever we think of African American heritage here, we think immediately all African American heritage came through slavery. From some of the research I've done with the Juan Bautista Danza National Historic Trail that goes from Mexico up through to San Francisco, is how San Francisco was founded with the Presidio. There's a big push on educating people about Afro-Latino heritage, that African Americans Africans, not African Americans at that point, came through on that trail, that expedition back in the 1700s, and it's something that's not very well known. So with what you're finding in the mounds and the mound builders and your heritage, do you find people not realizing that that Africans came over for different reasons?
That is true, and the research is one part of it, but in 2017 I did a DNA test, and some interesting information came up, including the fact that some of my earliest ancestors actually came through Siberia and the Bering Strait about 50,000 BC.
Wow.
And then I had an uncle, my mom's brother, test, and not only did that come up, but we also found ancient Californian tribes like the Miwok, Ohlone, and Serrano. And the Mesoamerican connection, which kind of validates that people were on that trail even farther back than that. But the Panamanian Highway goes all the way from California down to Central America into South America. So, yeah, there definitely has been migrations for a long time.
Wow, that's amazing. Because animals migrated back and forth, too. And you got to also think about when the Earth was all one big ball. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
We got to go back to that. And then when you think about the Native American cultures, the Indians, I mean, they came. There's a blend between Native American and Mexican Indian, right? So there's that connection, and then also from Canada because of their nomadic cultures.
Exactly, and I found all of that in the DNA. Surprisingly, I found the Mesoamerican, we found the Siberian, we found Kennewick, we found Clovis, and so, yeah, it's one gumbo pot of ethnicity.
It is interesting. I was going to say that I read a couple of years ago that the earliest fossil of the hummingbird was found in Europe. And right now, in fact, for the last 40, 50 years, Europe has had no hummingbirds. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, so that's kind of an eye-opener to the possibilities of species and people moving around and doing things that maybe what we were taught in school was what they thought then, and things don't update as fast as they should, and what they thought then seems like what you were taught kind of sticks in your mind of that's it, that's the truth. Anything after that doesn't count. But keeping an open mind about these things needs to happen, because maybe one day somebody will find a hummingbird fossil in this country that predates the one in Europe, and then it'll be back, well, hummingbirds came from here. But and it's like a ping pong ball game back and forth until the earliest of the earliest is found, and we'll never be here to know. As we move on, somebody else will find something earlier. So it's a big mystery all the time, which I find that really interesting.
Yeah, that is a fascinating point, and it also reminds me, there's a piece in my book where I mentioned that we often think the peanut came from Africa, but it actually is from Peru, from about 25,000 BC. Likewise with the coconut. So either, there's a possibility that they drifted on the water, or that people actually came here and brought them back there. But, yeah, that's really fascinating, the point that you make about the hummingbird. But I see there are parallels. And we don't know it all.
We don't,
Well, I'm thinking there'll be one benefit of global warming is that everything will melt and we'll start to see all these fossils.
Oh, God, I hope not.
I know.
Okay, I don't like that.
No, I don't either. But I do think
I don't like it.
No, when we were at Chaco Cultural National Historical Park a couple months ago in New Mexico, northern New Mexico, and I mean, this is really, you're talking about these ancient dwellings, and but it wasn't even a dwelling. How they did these ruins, but they're like celestial. They're actually like built their structures, these prehistoric sculptures, their dwellings like, but they're not, just to celebrate the solstice. And that's what it's believed. And some of the, some of the ancestors, well, I should say some of the family that are still around. And it's interesting to see how they interpret it, because everything was oral tradition, right? But when you go and stand in that history and you start to realize just how old this is, and then you go around the corner, well, it changed over here. But when we were there, Mr. Cornucopia, that is his real name, name, took us around, and we went on a tour, and he was talking about how through laser technology now that they are able to dig, without hurting the land or the artifacts that are buried, to be able to really use laser for archaeology digs and really get to see what is underneath there. With you going to the different mounds, I know you went to a number of sites, and I want to talk about Toltec mounds. That was our first mound site that we went to the other day, and that's on the front cover of your book. It's wild how that happened. Did you talk to any archaeologists to see how they were doing, and if they use that technology?
Well, no, that's new to me. I'm not familiar with that. I haven't really dealt a lot with archaeologists. I do have one, a retired professor from USC here, who actually kind of guided me on the path when I first began thinking about a book back in 2012. And so he gave me a template of how to set up a journal article. And in 2015, I put one up on LinkedIn, and then the following year I put the same journal article up on academia.edu. And he thought that it was important for me to start getting the information out. And so that basically, my only contact with archaeologists at this point.
Okay. Well, I'm glad he's getting it. You're documenting everything, which is really, really important. And but you also talk about the role between DNA and oral tradition, because when you start digging into the ancient past, you go, okay, we got cliff dwellings with, petroglyphs and pictographs that can help. But how do you get the information to really, did what you learned help you say, okay, the DNA test was correct? Because I know some people have a problem getting the accurate results from the DNA test.
That's true. I've been on this path much longer than I actually even knew that there was a family connection. So
okay.
As a teenager, as a youth, I would go to powwows. And I've gone to Sedona many times and have gone through the canyons and the vortexes and camping, and I was always the fire starter. And so to see all of this show up in the DNA, we had stories of my grandmother being Cherokee, and she had the long braids, so we thought so. But when the DNA came back, it turned out to be Creek. So it started with an oral tradition, but the documentation from the DNA pinpointed Creek and Lumbee and other ethnicities.
Oh, wow.
And so it actually even took me out of South Carolina. My mom's born in South Carolina. My grandparents were, my great-grand, and on the other side in North Carolina. But our McQueen DNA actually began in Alabama. And so I had to start searching there to actually find the trail. And then when the Mesoamerican came up, it traced from the tip of South America through Central America and into Mexico and through Texas to the southwest.
Oh, wow.
And so, so I had to look at the Creek culture, and I actually found my my ancestors and the name. Their names are Hadjo through a Scott-Irish man named James McQueen, who was born in 1690. One of the first traders here, and he married a Talisi princess from Alabama. And so it gave me a completely different narrative.
Wow.
And so that's kind of where this story begins.
Wow.
Even though the research had already been done, I didn't know that my family was going to intersect within that information.
I think that's when life does that good stuff. Go ahead, Holly.
That's kind of how it works. Remember the story I told about being related to the Donner Party,
Yes,
Mrs. Murphy. I worked on that for so many years. 30 years later, I find out she's my aunt. I see that over and over. It's so fascinating, the things we're drawn to and that we enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Some way, the root, it takes us back to our roots. It's very, very fascinating.
I think that's really true. Like there's certain, like you like a certain kind of music, you like a certain kind of painting, different colors excite you, and I think that's all part of what's in your DNA. And your DNA is a big pot of mixed things from all over the place. Because when you go to start checking your DNA, like I know from my family, which is really funny because nothing's true and then everything's true. Like I found through my papers, I have 2 birth certificates. Good for me. That's interesting. And so I was like, oh, okay, which one do you want? And they're all certified. I'm like, how does that happen? And then when I look at my grandparents on my dad's side, they lived in different places apparently at the same time. So sometimes when you're looking at factual documents, they don't really tell the full story. So I think you have to take your gut feelings about something and the paper documents, and then you got to go back and study, because I know my grandmother on my mom's side said my dad's side was part Paiute. My parents absolutely deny that, but then when you end up with 2 birth certificates, you got to start saying, hey, something's a little odd here. So,
I know it's cool. I know we're Paiute. I know there's Paiute because I have a photo in a book of a Paiute man, and I look just like him. I mean, I do look like a man now, but that's okay. But there's things that got interesting. I think that's what's interesting, Sufia, too, because of all the other books and documentaries that you've worked on, it seems that you have a big connection to medicinal herbs, and doesn't that tie all the way back?
Exactly, it does. But before I get on that point, my mom also had 2 birth certificates.
Really?
And
wow.
I'm celebrating her birthday today from the 2nd birth certificate. But we grew up all our life celebrating August 12th as her birthday.
Oh, my gosh.
And then 3 years before she passed on, she transitioned in 2013. The state of South Carolina sent her a new birth certificate. And what I found out often happens is that my mom was born at home, and sometimes the midwife didn't make it down to register it on time. I don't know that it actually took 3 years and 4 days, but the fact is that, yes, that does happen. So,
I like the one where my foot's tiny. One I look like, they put the little footprint, and that's not the legal document, but it came with it. One of them looks like a tiny baby footprint, and the other one looks like Bigfoot. So I chose my birth certificate.
What is going on this? This is, Holly, you've got to see this kind of thing all the time, like you were saying. I mean, it's like, okay, the gut. I wanted to ask you, Sufia, and Holly, I wanted to ask you on this, both of you. Sufia, when you were working on this, and there's things that you're finding your personal connections, do you ever meditate, and does any of that ever connect you? Like I find like meditation, it's like part visualization. I don't know, I feel like it's almost like a portal to connect with the past. I'm not trying to get weird on you, everybody, but I feel like there is this, if you do it in good, positive intent, that there is a way to kind of clear and get to the root of your family roots in a way that you can see things and visualize them. I know I have a really good imagination, but I really believe that there's a way to connect in some way. I'm really not trying to be weird, but does that make sense?
No, it does. It makes a lot of sense, and I could say that yes, I do meditate. I do yoga. I'm actually a certified yoga instructor. But prior to that, I had been meditating, and I feel like my ancestors have always communicated with me on some level, and I've had visions. And more recently, in the last couple of years, I don't know if it has anything to do with the confirmation of the DNA, but it's like some of the text that I wrote, like right before I would wake up in the morning, I would actually see the complete script, or I would hear what needed to be said. Mm-hmm. So I wholeheartedly agree with you, and I think that one example also in terms of my ancestors influencing or guiding me is that I have 3 Facebook friends that I've been friends with for years, and after the DNA test, we found that we were like related. We're cousins.
Oh, wow. My gosh. You know,
that's cool.
That's awesome. That is, there's people, you meet them in life and you feel like you've been in their life before. Yeah, like
exactly.
We all decided to come out here together and have a party. I don't know. But it's like,
I can't explain it. I just have to respect it.
Yeah.
For what it has done.
Yeah, I think that, Holly, I mean, now, are we getting weird now, Holly?
People call it different things. I call it a spiritual experience. It talks to your soul and you feel it inside. I have a cousin who had a rough life growing up and had a good friend. When he was in university, they were married. He was married. This friend was married. They lived in a duplex. Both of them, just really good friends. And 40, 50 years later, he found out she was his half sister.
Oh, wow.
And they had been friends, and she was an only child. And, she said, if I ever could have a brother, I would want it to be you. And down the road,
Wow.
And how did these things happen? I don't really know, but
yeah,
I call it spiritual.
Yeah.
But, I think, there's a greater power out there that guides us so often, and we may or may not be aware of it. I think those of us that talk about it a little bit are more aware of that power, and it's available to us.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're attracted to people by the things they say, who they are, what they think, and also their body language. I know there are sometimes when you'll have for no sensible reason that you put your finger on, you'll have an instant dislike for somebody. Maybe it's somebody on the TV, and you're like, oh no, turn that off. Without even knowing what the person's saying. It's just an instant dislike, just like you can have instant likes. And I think that's part of nature's part of protecting you, like when to run, and when not to. And I think it's so deeply ingrained in our DNA that it's hard for us to put sense to it. Like you might say that you feel you're related to this person over here, and somebody else will say, "Oh, that's just wishful thinking." Because you like them, or you like them and you find out later you're related, and they go, "Oh, well, that makes sense."
I have a funny story to tell you that is kind of related to that. In the early 80s, I had a very good friend who was an advisor to me in college, and his sister-in-law came out to California from New York to visit. And we were chatting, and it turned out that she was born in St. Stephen, South Carolina, and my mom's born in St. Stephen's. And so from 1981, we started joking that we were cousins. And 10 years later, her mom came out from Philadelphia, and her mom and my mom got together, and they started talking, and they found out their parents were actually first cousins from St. Stephen, South Carolina. So what turned out to be us, just joking about being cousins, we actually are related.
Wow, that's wild.
I think wild. In nature, people and animals group together by weaknesses and strengths for survival purposes. And I think that that is part of our DNA, and that this is what kind of dictates how your life goes, who you'll marry, who you'll be friends with, who you won't be friends with, whether or not you're related. Sometimes you'll be related to somebody and not like them because there's something else in the DNA that goes, watch out. So I just feel like for me at least, my strongest connection is going to go right to the earth and nature. And then comes the connection with people, if that makes any sense. Probably going to get in trouble for that.
You're always in trouble, Nancy. She's always in trouble.
I know.
It is interesting. I wanted to go back to you going to Toltec Mounds and saying, I saw that you did yoga out there. And Sufia, when you were there doing that, did you feel a connection?
Oh, I did. And I've been mound trekking now for about 10 years since I first moved. Well, actually, even in California before I moved here, I had a friend that was a ranger with the National Park Service, and he had told me about several mounds, one near Balboa and Los Encinos. So that kind of planted a seed. He also was Native American or Afro-Native American. So when I moved here, I just was on a mission, and I have had my husband all over the Southeast. And so we've gone to, I think our first mound was Santee Mound here in South Carolina. We went to Edisto, which is a shell midden. It's a mound, but it's like a garbage dump, and it shows what people ate, and it's just filled with shells. We've gone to mounds that are no longer there. We've gone to mounds that we couldn't access because they're private property. And we've gone to mounds in Georgia, gone to Etowah. We actually went a few years ago. The Smithsonian returned some artifacts for the first time in 100 years. And so we went to that exhibit, and many of the pictures in the book I took there for several reasons. I didn't know that I was related to that mound culture, but I also was trying to avoid paying royalties, to use other people's photos, to be honest with you. And so I was driving from Southern California. My mom had just passed. This was 2013. And I was going through Little Rock where a friend of mine lives. And so that's how we ended up going to Toltec Mound. And I did feel a very strong connection there.
I wanted to circle back on mounds because I didn't know, I've seen like the Mayan ruins, I haven't been there personally, but seen that. And we've been to different ruins in Africa. There's the Getty ruins. That was still one of the most trippiest places I've ever been. Because ruins, there's life. Like I feel like when you go, you can hug a tree and you can hug a rock and you will feel something. And you can hug a mound, you can hug a ruin, and you'll feel something. You don't have to touch it to hug it. But there is a vibe, and it's trying to understand what that is. That's that part of that mystery. And the mounds were something completely different. I didn't quite understand. I'm like, is this a burial site? Because I've done so many Native American, or I should say, ancestral peoples, cliff dwellings out in the Southwest. I'm like, what is this mound? And they're pretty darn big. As you start getting up to them, you're like, okay, whoa, like this is pretty huge. And it was interesting because we did our first walk through a swale up on the El Camino Real de los Tejas Trail in East Texas, too. And it was like, okay, there's a lot of mounds and pathways going on out in this eastern area. Something's up. So the mound, can you give everyone kind of an overview of the mounds? And I also want to talk about the royalty, too, that there's queens, man. There's queens back then. Yay.
Well, the mounds or earthworks, they're like you say, they're huge. They're monumental. They were used for various purposes. And I draw some parallels between the mounds here and the mounds and pyramids in Mexico, as well as the pyramids in Egypt. They're all built on the cardinal axis, north, south, east, west, and they're all in an alignment where certain mounds have holes cut in the top that are called zenith tubes. And so they can track the stars. They're like observatories. So they can track the stars and the equinox, the planets, and things of that sort. So that allowed them to begin to do agriculture And you find the same parallel in all three of those places. Other mounds were burial mounds, and that is where they buried oftentimes the chiefs, and they were successively buried, like one generation on top of another generation. Other mounds, I was able to meet the Empress of Washita in 1998 and able to interview her, and I asked her why they built the mounds. And she told me that in about 3500 BC, because she traced her ancestry to about 4000 BC, them crossing the Bering Strait. And she said in the area where Washita is in Louisiana, there was a flood. And so 5 ships left with the people, and they went to Trinidad and Tobago. And 3 ships returned, and when they returned, they built the mounds, and they put their houses on top of them so that if the waters came again, they would survive.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah,
and there's
they're
your
very
medicinal herbs. See?
Yes.
There's your medicinal herbs from Trinidad and Tobago.
Exactly.
There you go.
Yes,
See?
that too. And there was also a familial connection. I remember when I told my aunt about the Washita and meeting the Empress, she was telling me something about how Geechees, Gullah-Geechees in South Carolina, we're highland Geechees, and the Creoles in Louisiana, they're lowland Geechees. And so there was like this familial connection. And after the DNA test, I have found so many relatives in Louisiana.
Wow,
So,
this is wild.
Wow.
Yet you are sub-Saharan African. That's the majority of your DNA is or your ancestry is what, 90%?
Yes, that is correct, 90%.
Yeah.
And I found a lot of Nigerian in there, Yoruba, Igbo, and Fulani. And so my theory in the book is that, as I said, I found the DNA coming across Siberia and the Bering Strait 50,000 BC, that they were African descendant people, and amongst that group that migrated.
And yeah, because the Saharans up in that area, they were the migratory tribes, and they still are today. You know, I know in South Africa, there's big communities of Nigerians over the last few years as well. I know there's all kinds of reasons for that, but they're always nomadic people, and that, you know, it's to me like, why not? You know, and you have those cheekbones. Because I saw your picture, I'm like, man, I'm like, you got Maasai blood in you, and then then that's connected, right, Nancy, in some way? Do you think?
Yeah, the Maasai. Yeah,
that did show up.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that did show up. But the other thing is that, I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
The other thing that I found is that in each generation, starting with this Scott-Irish man, James McQueen, when he married Starlina Hadjo, they had a child named Fulani. And Fulani is a tribe from the west coast of Africa, Nigeria, Benin, Mali. And then the next generation, his son Peter McQueen, had a daughter named Talisi, and Talisi was the name of the tribe. And then in a following generation, when Peter McQueen passed and his wife remarried, she had a daughter named Muskogee, which is the name of the tribe. So I found this pattern of naming, and there were girls in particular after the tribe. And I'm thinking that, well, maybe to keep the tradition and the culture. But yeah, I just thought that was kind of interesting.
It is interesting. Holly, don't you think we've got to connect Sufia with Paula J?
Oh, that would be good. He's doing a lot of work on the continent in several countries over there.
Oh, wow.
That's cool. He's trying to document because in Africa, pretty much, writing family names, it's all oral, and when people are nomadic and oral, it's very hard to trace roots. It's really difficult.
He's been recovering or recording over 1.5 million names a year.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Through oral history, and some of some of the memories that they're gathering go back more than 18 generations. Now, not all of them, that's a lot for someone
to
fascinating. Have memorized, but and he's just opening up Liberia and Nigeria, and he's been working in Ghana for, I don't know, as long as I've known him, but he's now got 5 countries open, and he's probably doing more than 1.5 million.
Wow,
I've asked him recently.
Yeah, I'll send you the very first interview we had with Holly was last year when we introduced her International Family History Expo, and Paul was on the show. So I will send you that link for that show so you can hear it with Paul. Yeah, everyone. It's a great conversation and amazing. And that's what I was saying at the beginning of the show to Holly. Like there's this connection. Family history is international, Going back to the Toltec mounds, I mean, it was amazing how we ended up there. We're like, we're going to Little Rock. I thought we were doing the riverfront. And next thing you know, they have all these nature sites. And, just down the road, here it is, these mounds. And you're like, what, the city? And here's these mounds. It's quite amazing. And Little Rock is an amazing place, too. But going out there, and let me tell you, don't wear jeans in the summer, on a summer afternoon. Do not wear jeans, because it looked like I had diapers on by the time I was done in that humidity. I'm just saying.
That was really funny.
That was, you're going to sweat, but it felt good. But the people are the Plum Bayou people, right? And it was interesting because they were kind of part of the woodlands, right? There's like a forest, so they lived in the forest. There's a native plant garden, and it was full of butterflies and passion fruit. I felt like I was back home in Kenya with the passion fruit. I'm like, ooh, this is good.
And wild. So it was great.
Yeah.
It
was just
wild.
Beautiful. But yeah. But there's this is where there is a royalty connected, right, Sufia?
There is, yeah. And like the burial mounds, many of them are where the chiefs were buried, and the royal families were often buried in most of those burial grounds. For example, one of the ancestors, James McQueen's son, his name is Peter McQueen, or his native name is Talmuchis Hajo. And he's actually buried in the last mound I recently visited in Georgia. It's called Okmulgee. And I just found that out in the writing of the book, that he's buried there in an unmarked grave. Now, there is a funeral mound there, but part of it was destroyed when they built a railroad through the area. Yeah, I just find that, and when I went there, unlike the other mounds, I've always gone with somebody, but I went there with myself. And it was the most amazing experience. And I think it was because they have something called an earth lodge, and you can actually walk inside of there. And it was really phenomenal. But yeah, I felt a stronger connection there than I felt anywhere else. And I don't know that it is because I found that I have an ancestor buried somewhere there, but I did love it.
It's kind of like we're metal detectors. As you go through, it's like bing, bing, bing.
True.
There you are. Tell people the story of this connection to De Soto, Hernando De Soto, and his history is all over the Southeast. I mean, Spanish explorer, and man, it's like I did this research on what's his name, Nancy out in Point Reyes, and he's English, and he was just like cruel to the Spaniards. The Spaniards were cruel to him. Oh gosh, what's his name? The explorer and for England. Oh
Cabeza?
Gosh,
no.
English guy. Oh, I'll get it. I'll look it up.
Sir Francis Drake.
Sir Francis Drake. I don't even want to call him Sir. Excuse me.
Well, but that's his title. Sorry.
I know.
Yeah.
But he was brutal. And then you go, do I want to tell his history?
But they were
and see
brutal.
They were. And see, that's the thing that a lot of times it was really hard to find information on De Soto. A lot of academics don't want to write about him. And I was reading so many journal articles that was saying it was taboo. And I kept wondering, why? And then as a Spanish major, I came across DeSoto's journal.
Ooh.
And I read the account in Spanish. And then I began to understand why a lot of academics steer away from writing about him, or even the trail, his expedition. And one of the reasons I think is because he kidnapped two of my ancestors. One from South Carolina, who in his journal they called her the Lady of Cofetazque. But the original name, and again being a Spanish major who was introduced to the Nahuatl language, the original name of this area here in South Carolina was Cofetazque, which is an Olmec word when you break down the etymology of the word. And so that is a connection between the Mississippian Moundbuilders and the Olmec pyramid builders. So a little bit further on his journey, when he gets to Alabama, he had this real nasty technique of kidnapping chiefs. So he kidnapped the Queen of Cofetazque, but she was able to get away. She escaped.
Go, girl.
Yeah. But when he got to Alabama, he kidnapped Tuscaloosa, and we've heard of the city of Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
Right.
And I found out that Tuscaloosa is a Choctaw word that means black warrior. And it turns out that he was an ancestor of Starlina Hadjo, and he was related to the Queen of Cofetazque. So DeSoto kidnapped him and his 18-year-old son, and in the midst of everything, there was a battle. It's called the Battle of Mobila, and it's an area not too far from Mobile, Alabama. And they ultimately set the village on fire, and they killed 2,500 to 3,000 people. And I think that that is very tragic. I don't call that a battle. I call that very
that's a slaughter.
Cowardly.
Yeah, that's
a slaughter.
That's the slaughter.
And it's cowardly.
Yeah.
It's not a war.
It is.
But I
Absolutely.
think that is why people don't want to write about DeSoto.
But however, it's important because that kind of history is still connected. You can't, women's history, people don't want to hear about the female criminals in history, and I find them fascinating because they were smart. And their whole, I'm not saying their crimes were good, but there's an interesting thing of how they ran things. By the way, Holly, I thought of you when we drove through Leavenworth, and I thought after our last conversation on crime history and prison records being part of your DNA, your family history, I should say, family history research, don't shy away from it. But when people start not looking at, you can't ignore the bad because it's still telling the story. And if we ignore the bad, how do we fix it in the future?
Yeah, exactly.
It's about power. It's about power. And when people who want power, if they can suppress it for whatever reason and however they can, then they can exert their power over another group of people. I mean, we understand what happened in the Holocaust, and yet there are people who are denying that it ever took place. If we allow these stories to go untold, we just set ourselves up for it to happen again and again. It really is important.
Thank you. I think it is.
It's even like to the point of taking down statues. I get that statues who say we honor this person and then list all the bad things they did. Just change the plaque. Just change the wording of the plaque. This is a person who did this in this spot at this time. Without the opinion, this is what this person did. We know this because we have this and this to back it up. So instead of taking statues down and pretending that this history did not happen or dishonoring somebody, you're not dishonoring them by taking down their statue. You're really not. You're not changing history by putting a statue up or taking it down. History is history. So,
but those statues aren't saying the bad stuff. Those statues are glorifying.
That's what I'm saying. Change the wording on the plaque because it's a plaque that says in honor of. Yeah. So changing the plaque Like I remember going to the Mount Safari Club in Kenya the first time, and I was horrified because I'm leading a group of animal, nature-loving people into the Safari Club, and it's the movie stars used to go there and blah blah. You walk in and there's every dead animal you can think of hanging on the wall. It was horrific, and then they serve you food next to a stuffed little antelope who looks like close enough to eat off your plate. It was creepy. So they finally put a plaque up. They didn't get rid of what they had. They rearranged it so it wasn't so in your face. And they put an apology plaque up saying this happened before we educated ourselves in conservation. So you could handle what you were about to see, because it's important to see what humans have done just so we can change it in the future. And it's important to see it. Well, it is. I think that's
and you can move them from.
And yes,
you can move them from being the center of the town as though this is the glorified park of somebody. Put them in a museum property. That's the other thing.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah. Just don't honor them, but don't let them off the hook by pretending they did not do what they did.
Yeah. Right.
That's a touchy subject.
Yeah, it is.
It is a touchy subject.
Yeah.
We're going to get emails.
I like the idea of the museum.
We all have ancestors who did things we're not proud of.
Yeah, exactly.
And we all have ancestors who we are extremely proud of because they stood the test of bravery, courage, morality, whatever. That they went out of this life with honor. And but we all have it.
Again, I feel that's a touchy subject because like I can't recall his name, but there's a statue here on the State House grounds in South Carolina of a doctor who mortally wounded and killed African women who were enslaved. A gynecologist. I can't recall his name. But that is where the whole science and study of gynecology began, by experimenting on women who had no anesthesiology. I mean, anesthesia. No painkiller. And to use another analogy, I don't think there's a statue of Hitler in Germany anywhere. So I think a museum, if they're going to have relics like that, might be a much better place than to glorify a monster.
Absolutely. Don't put them in a park. Don't give them a park.
I agree with you. I just don't feel like we should never mention them as if it never happened.
Yeah.
No, I agree. People need to know, but often we don't know the full story or the full history. Like even the Confederate flag in South Carolina, it did not come up until 1964 when the Voting Rights Act was passed. So that is not ancient history, although it's the rebel flag from the Civil War. So it can get really touchy, and I'm not really into politics or anything, and I usually don't have those kind of conversations. But I just think that certain images invoke feelings that we don't have the information to process.
I'm with you on that, Sufia. I think it's all like pulling certain words out of books and stuff. I think that anything glorifying someone who's hurt and killed, is you can't glorify them. I don't like it when they put parks with someone's name. It's like Christopher Columbus. There's a park I love in Tucson, one of my favorite ones, and they changed the name of the park to Christopher Columbus Park. And so somebody went on there and wrote racist on the sign, which is pretty true. Why would you honor somebody like that? Christopher Columbus Day, there's like a whole thing on that. But this kind of conversation, this kind of discussion is always important, because it's about, at some point, you've got to have some enlightenment over not letting things be the same way all the time, and looking at the good and the bad, and people getting to it is about education, no matter what.
It is.
True.
And so no matter what, all of it's going to educate people if they take time to look beyond a plaque. I think a plaque doesn't tell you the story, and if they only get that one negative thing, then they're going to, I don't know, and that may empower people that are already still doing that and marching with their little, citronella candles. Anyway, to get off of all that, get off of all of that.
Oopsie.
This is why I like going to parks like national parks and state parks. That really, here's your information, and I think it gives you that. And is that, I mean, I've never met a mound trekker like you, Sufia. So this is cool. And look how you get into it, and look how, doing your family history. I think, Holly, have you seen this with all your teachings that you do online and at your expos? Have you seen that now people are starting to be interested in history that they may not have been interested before because it's now connected to them?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When my kids were growing up, they'd come home and say, I hate social studies. And I'd be horrified, I'd go, oh, are you joking? But I had this pedigree chart on the wall, and it had my kids on the line number 1, if you are familiar with pedigree charts. And then number 2 was my husband and his line, and number 3 was me and my line. And I'd say, what are you studying? And then we'd go, here you are, here's Daddy, here's Grandma Betty. They knew these people. And I'd say, this is her mama, and this is her daddy, Grandma Betty's grandpa. And he lived during the Civil War, and you're learning this stuff. And he participated and he fought for. And these are the things that happened to him. And then they'd go back to school and they get A+ on the test because, hey, that's my war. That's something that happened to my family. And that's how I instilled a love for history in my children as I raised them, and I taught them through using family history. And, we have people, I mean, from every side.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Them, you've got in the Civil War, you've got this, and you've got this, and you've got this, and and the American Revolution, and we had Hessian soldier who was hired by Great Britain to come and fight against these rebellious Americans, and George Washington said, hey, we will give you land if you'll quit fighting against us. Okay. And then he fights for George Washington, and he gets taken as a prisoner of war by the British, and he's a deserter. It's fascinating history, and so he fought for everybody. And
equal opportunity.
And people, as you do this, you find out that your ancestors, they do things that you're astounded by, but it's a foreign place. The past is like going to a foreign country.
Yeah. You
really have to study a lot to understand their mindset on any kind of a level, because we just, our morals, our culture, the things that we look at today are very different than what they were even 100 years ago, let alone 500 years ago. And so to understand how these things could happen and be buried, you have to understand the time that people were living in. But the records are there, and we can find them. And Sufia, I really applaud you for what you've done. I think it's awesome. And I'm sorry that it had to be so many 100 years before it could be uncovered, but sometimes that's the nature of history, because people in power, they're going to tell a story they want to tell, and they glorify it. They make it look good.
Yeah, for sure.
That's true. And it's hard to create a new narrative.
Yeah, it is. It is. And that's, even talking about the statue thing, all of this is I look at everything that we've talked about today and family history and tracing history and understanding the past for the future, right, is all the shift towards unity. That's how I look at it, is understanding the good, bad, the ugly, and the beautiful. It is about that shifting and moving forward. And, and I see, hey, I just love the feminine power of these queendoms. I'm just saying. I like that. We got to have more of that. But Sufia, do you?
And that's yes.
Go ahead.
Yes. No, and I was about to say, and that's an untold story in terms of the matrilineal culture that was here, because they were queendoms, and we haven't heard that aspect yet.
Yeah, I like that. Well, I'm like, Holly's saying we applaud what you've done. And do you think that taking your book, Moundbuilders of Ancient America, A Legacy Reclaimed, everybody's on Amazon. Just look up Sufia Giza on Amazon or go to our website, moundbuilderswindclan.com. Do you ever see this being made into a film of some sort?
You know, funny that you said that. I met a filmmaker last month who turned out to be a friend of mine here, her uncle. And he bought the book. He was fascinated with the story, so we'll see where that goes.
Ooh,
I'm
I
very
like
much
this.
open to it because there are aspects that we haven't even gotten into in terms of the Indian Wars and the G word that a lot of people don't want to say, genocide. And so that's one of the main reasons that it's been difficult to find this part of the story in terms of my ancestors, because a lot of them, our Trail of Tears began in 1814, almost 25 years before the Indian Removal Act.
Right.
I have old settler ancestors that were displaced after a battle. It's called Horseshoe Bend, but we call it Tahopeka. And they were misplaced, and they were sent to Indian Springs, Arkansas, in 1814, and then in 1825 or 26, I believe, they were moved into Indian Territory, which is now Oklahoma. So I have other relatives that refused to go, and they went into Florida and became Seminole chiefs.
Oh,
And so there's so many parts of the story that I had to piece together because this is not in the history books, like in one book. I mean, it's out there, but you have to dig.
And it's a lot of, there's a lot of work. It's exciting, but it is hard work. It's interesting when you say, okay, so then they're like, hey, we're not going to Oklahoma. We're going to go over to the Seminoles. So now you've got intertribal connections, right? Intertribal communities. So doesn't that change things up when you're doing your research?
Exactly. It does.
Wow. If we try to do our Paiute history, that could be really difficult because some Paiutes, did choose to go and be part of the reservation. Not choose, but, that they were like, okay, we'll do that. And then, have life that way. But there were some Paiutes who said, heck no, we're off, and became more nomadic. And they're spread out everywhere. They didn't even live together as a tribe. And so we met a Paiute man, and he's a musician, wonderful flute player up in Sonoma County about, I'm going to say about 10 years ago. And we sat and connected, and it's trippy because we're talking with him, and it's almost like a reflection, and he was just talking about this whole part of trying to find his family, and also this really hard part of documenting the language, because it was so oral. It's, I look at what they're doing. The Quechan tribe down in Yuma, Arizona, where our hotel headquarters are, they're trying to do it. And yet the chiefs are actually arguing with each other about what this word was and that word. And then when we were in Louisiana, in Northwest Louisiana, Natchitoches, Louisiana, we went to the folk festival there, and we met with this tribal elder. And forgive me for not remembering the tribe name. I have it all written down in my notes. It's been a whirlwind. She was talking about her tribe were up in the Northwest, and they were a tribe of 600, and that was them, their own tribe, and nobody, later intertribal connections and community was created, so their language started to get watered down a bit. But her dad actually created her tribe's dictionary for their language, and it's documented. It's with documented through Congress and everything. And she was teaching us about their basket weaving, and we got to call her. I want to go film her, man, because it was the history.
Oh, she was cool.
I felt like
way cool.
We had this one opportunity to get this piece of information from her. You know what I mean? It's when you, it's special, and I feel like it's a need that we all have to do, is to try and document everything as much as possible, because it's important, especially of the ancient cultures, that we do that. Holly said that family history is like going to another country. And on that note, it's time to jump in the time machine. Sufia, we have our own time machine, and we can go anywhere in the world, any place we want to go, forwards into the future or backwards into the past, and we get out wherever we want. So are you ready to get in the time machine?
I am. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Cool.
All right, everybody, stand back. We're gonna crank this puppy up here. Here we go. questions on this. Holly can go first. Holly, and besides, she's a grandma, this week, so she gets to go first on everything today. So Holly, you get to get out of the time machine wherever and whenever you want. So, who, what, where? Who are you meeting, or are you meeting someone? Tell us where are you going to pull the trigger? I shouldn't say that. I don't like that word. Where are you going to push the landing button? You're going to push the landing button.
I'm thinking I'd like to go to the colonial South Carolina and Georgia, where my ancestors are lost in the records. I continue to find records, but I have a lot of work to do there. I'd be fascinated to find the lineages that we all connect to each other. I know we have them, and it would be fun to be able to find how we each connect to each other and how our ancestors interacted. So
that'd be cool.
Colonial America. I'd like to pop out, and maybe I'd want to be. The matrilineal, that matriarchal order is much more prevalent than most people realize. And in our family, we're real strong, my women. And we, our husbands just shake their heads and walk away. They just can't fight us. And so I wonder where that really comes from, because I
just asked my husband if he heard that.
I love that. My daughter that just had her baby is really strong-willed, and we have 3 sons and then 2 daughters. And my youngest daughter just had her 3rd child, and she's very strong-willed. My boys they love their brother-in-law. They said he's the only man on the planet that would put up with this, but his Samoan, and the Samoan people are matriarchal, so he can deal with her because that's how he was raised, and so I feel. I mean, I'm sure he gets frustrated too, but we all do in relationships, whether it's a spouse or a neighbor. We just work on things and do everything we can to get along. But I'd like to see where that power and energy. I'd like to see where that comes from. Be fun.
Yeah, that's Sufia. You're right. She is Mama G. Sufia, where are you getting?
What I said. I don't know if you heard what I said when I was listening to her, but my husband is here listening, and I asked him. I said, "Well, did you hear that?" If I could go back in time, I probably would want to go to Egypt and visit some of the dynasties, because they were also matriarchal. And I've been to Egypt, but 3 years ago, and it's not matriarchal now so much. But I think that would probably be one of the stops I would love to make.
Oh, I'm with you on that.
Awesome.
It's fascinating. That whole history out there is just mind blowing. Nancy, what about you?
Well, I got to go back to dinosaur days.
Nancy was a dinosaur in her past life.
I know. I might still be today. No, I wanted to just go see the dinosaurs for real. You can see the bones in the museum and stuff, but when I look at certain animals, I'm really curious about animals that kind of, while you're kind of a bird and you're kind of a not, like the duck-billed platypus really fascinates me, because it's a little bit of every kind of animal. So it's kind of like the missing link of animals, and I'm sure there's even more. So I would like to just study from that point upwards or onwards, so that by the time we get to people, we can figure out like animals are in a particular place because that's what they require to survive, and I think that's going to be true of people as well. And so if you know that people are from a certain place so that they can survive, then what's all the big drama about being different?
There you go. Yeah. I like that.
It makes total sense that people grow up differently in order to survive. And I'm not saying there should be wars at all. I'm saying so that we don't have them.
Celebrate.
Celebrate
difference because difference makes you united. That's how I look at it. That is,
and you get
the
lots
epitome
of good food that way.
Oh my gosh,
that's
tell
right.
me about it. We just came back from the South. My gosh, you know what, Holly, we need to go do that CrossFit thing you do because I've eaten every bit of fried food you can imagine. I'm telling you, but it's been good. I'm hopping out of the time machine.
Cabbage.
Oh, I haven't had fried cabbage yet.
No.
Not yet.
Oh, yeah.
But it's coming. But we did have tamales in Zwolle in Louisiana. And the tamale history there is very rich, and it comes from the Native American culture. Now, I'm thinking, how did that happen? We thought tamales were Mexican. Well, you tell me.
See?
I don't know, but they have a big tamale festival, and the recipes, and they've even done their DNA to find out about that their tamales come from Zwolle, Louisiana, and that's that. So there you go.
How about that?
I didn't know DNA and tamales went hand in hand, but apparently the recipe in the back in the day was like deer meat and things like that. But now they use shredded pork and red pepper. That's it. That's the thing. Obviously, they do little variations, but we tasted them, and normally, like they're thin and different. They're different than Mexican tamales, and they're good. They're good.
They're totally
red pepper,
different.
anything with red pepper. But I want to get out in Louisiana. I want to get out between 1819 and 1821. We just came back from exploring what's called the No Man's Land, and this is a territory. It basically follows the Sabine River, where Toledo Bend is. So it goes on the eastern portion of Louisiana, and this is the portion of land that after the Louisiana Purchase happened, you think back in the day, letters were not mailed. There was no Pony Express nor telegraphs, but they went by ship. So for those 3 years, there was absolutely no law and order. There were privateers, buccaneers, all of it going on. There was bootlegging that didn't need to be bootlegged.
Cool.
There was everything, and I want to go there and see what was happening because there's let me tell you, there's some fascinating and some crazy stories that come out there. And right now they're celebrating 3 years of this, and through this no man's land of all kinds of things happening in those 3 years with no law and order, the communities have now merged together in a way that when you travel there and understand this territory, you get a bigger scope of what Louisiana is, which is far more than New Orleans, not knocking New Orleans at all, but you get to understand how everybody is connected between these different parishes. And that to me is exactly what life is about. Is you forget the borders. We don't care about those when it comes to
no, we don't like them.
Anything actually. But you know what I mean. So it's just this interesting thing that you learn the foods, and like you go to Natchitoches and you get meat pies. You go to Zwolle and you get a tamale. And if you go to Vernon Parish, you can go on a gas station food trail, and the food is really good. So there you go. And you can have muffins made out of yams. So I'm just saying, the no man's land thing to me is really interesting, and the matriarchal history that comes from there. We saw juke joints that are now unfortunately covered with weeds and trees and stuff. Old juke joints, like places where Fats Domino played, and Anyway, I want to go back there. I have a love affair with that region, and so I'm going to keep going back, and I'll find out I come from there. And that means Nancy did too.
You will. You will.
I know. Thank you so much, Sufia, for joining us. And I got to give a shout out to Makeda. Champagne toast to you, Makeda. Out there, we left Makeda.
Well, it was my pleasure. I thank you for having me on.
Thank you. And I want to play this song for you. It's by Carmen Lundy, is one of the most amazing jazz singers. She's an amazing painter, composer. And this is a very traditional song. Some say Kumbaya, but it's Kumbaya. And when she came on our show, this is off of her album Code Noir. She talked about how it's Kumbaya, and I'm probably still saying it wrong. And this is her take of it.
Can I ask you if she gave it the Gullah roots of that song credit?
Yes.
Because the Gullah-Geechee people is wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, that's exactly that. When she came, I'll dig that interview up and send it to you too, because that was everything she was talking about. That it was so more than her parents telling her and teaching her the song when she started digging into the roots, and that's why she recorded it. And
that is so cool. That is so cool. Thank you so much. What a treat.
Thank you. You take care. It's been a treat having you on the show. Everyone, again, go get the book from Sufia Giza. Again, go to moundbuilderswindclan.com. The book is Moundbuilders of Ancient America, A Legacy Reclaimed. So here it is from Carmen Lundy, and you can keep up with Carmen at carmenlundy.com. Kumbaya. Did I say that correctly, Sufia? I know I'm going to mess it up.
Well, we say, in Gullah, we would say Kumbaya.
Oh, okay.
That means come over here. Come over here. Kumbaya.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exactly.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Here it is.
Thank you.
I'm not going to say it. All right. Take a listen to Carmen.
You all take care. Blessings. Peace.
Thank you.
Blessings to you too.
Father Kumbaya, brother Kumbaya, sister Kumbaya. Mother, come by here, father, come by here, brother, come by here, sister, come by here. Come by here. People are suffering and need some understanding right now. Time to heal. Right now. Time to change. The time to gain. Father Kumbaya, Father Kumbaya, brother Kumbaya, sister Kumbaya. Lover Kumbaya, daughter Kumbaya, son Kumbaya, Kumbaya. The time to heal, the time to change, the time to give Yahweh, time to live is here. People suffering and need some understanding right now. Time to change, the time to change right now. Get together heart to heart, get together eye to eye, time for change, yes we can, make a better life and survive, keep alive. Father, come by here. Brother, come by here. Sister, come by here. Oh, mother, father, come by here. Daughter, son, come by here. Lover, father, come by here. I don't know if I can make it. Come by here, brother, sister, come by here, come by here. My. Time to heal, time for change, a time to give, make a better life. Oh, mother, come by here, love or daughter, come by.